Behold, League of Legends is getting more lore. Yes, I will be the first one to admit that this year the lore is kinda slow. But we are getting new comics, and since the comics are really popular, nobody should complain. And yet, there are people who do complain about the comics. Or at least, specifically, this one. And while I can agree with some of these complaints, the truth is that most people still really enjoyed this one. And so, let's dive into the newest comic that might finally explain what is this season even gonna be about. And it's funny that we have to say it now, because the season literally just started. So, as always, this comic starts with a quick summary of the story that happened so far. But because the story isn't really connected to anything else that came before, this is technically the first explanation of the story we got. After the fiendish murder of her parents, meaning that this story happens after Vayne's parents met Evelyn, Shauna Vayne devoted her life to ridding the woods of supernatural monsters. Now, a decade later, she has received a letter from an old family friend, pleading for help with a rampaging demon on the outskirts of the kingdom of Demacia. Worried for his safety, she makes a long journey to the dark wildwoods, hoping she makes it in time. Now here, you immediately may have some questions. For example, who is the family friend? What are these demons, and what's going on in Wildwoods? And well, thankfully, while you wouldn't be able to get the context out of anything else, this comic focuses on exactly that. So, it begins on the outskirts of the Wildwoods. And it starts with some pretty awesome Diablo vibes. It all begins with the comic reading a part of the letter that the family friend sent to her. And the letter is marked with this suspicious symbol. One that is likely related to the demon hunters. So then, Vayne enters a building that is very likely one of the buildings from her childhood. You'll see a similar one later. And she finds something that looks like a demonic summoning circle. But it's not. In reality, this is one of the wards that was supposed to keep the demons away. And already we have interesting details pouring in. For example, it seems like the symbols on this ward reference demons that we know. For example, some of these jagged runes with the dot in the middle look very close to the runes that are often around fiddlesticks. So we can assume that the ward is using the symbols of the demons whom it is supposed to be pushing back. So Vayne examines this, she gets confused that this ward didn't really work, but she quickly brushes it off because the letter continues. And it mentions that the family friend and her parent and everyone else failed her. The truth is, this part doesn't exactly match anything in Vayne's bio, which means it confirms that this comic is exploring a whole new story for Vayne. Anyway, then the letter mentions that he can't change the past, and Vayne deserves to know the truth. Which is where this trinket appears on the screen. Vayne then picks it up and it is obvious that this item is linked to the character who wrote this letter. After which, in a very classic way, the family friend begs Vayne to rid them of the powerful demon. And in exchange, he would tell her the truth. Which again, whatever that might be. And that's where it turns out that this was just the intro, and so it is time for a good old flashback. And so, we stay at the outskirts of the Wildwoods, but now we are in the past. This should be about a decade earlier, when Vayne was young. Also, I keep calling her Vayne, but just keep in mind that Vayne is the family name. Everyone's Vayne, she's Shauna. Anyway then, who's that? That's not Vayne. At least, we think it's not. If it's her brother, well, that's gonna be a whole new obstacle. But yes, isn't this the fellow who is throwing the nails that were teased in the death video? Why yes, that would mean that this is Loke, the next champion. And so, the comic reveals that these two have been training together to be demon hunters. After which it shows that Loke is not as skilled as Vayne yet. And I wonder if this scene is here to show us that Loke is behind Vayne, because that might be one of the motivations for him to do something questionable, to be as strong as Vayne eventually. That would be the classic stereotype. But that's when a new figure appears. And this figure has the trinket on his neck, which we previously saw. And so this confirms that yes, this is the person who wrote the letter. Anyway, in this scene, he came here to confront Loke, who lost his control, he lashed out in anger, and he threw the nail very close to the dark woods. So the family friend lectured him about what would his parents think about him. After which, Vayne quietly walked away to pick up her arrows. Now, you might think that Vayne did this because she didn't have parents, so she couldn't relate. But as of the time of this comic, she did still have her parents. In fact, the next scene directly confirmed that this is happening before they all met Evelyn. Anyway, since Loke threw the nail near the Wildwoods, Vayne went there to pick it up, and she got stopped by their mentor because the woods were off limit. And they had to wait for Vayne's parents to do their business here first, whatever that might be. So Vayne was confused because she didn't think the woods would be that scary, and the mentor told her that he would explain it to her when she gets older. And for now, she should remember that anyone who walks into the woods is forever changed. And with that, we transition into the present times. Now, this line is actually very interesting because it directly mimics what we saw in Garen's previous comic. There, we actually saw Loke in a local pub talking to the bar lady, who told him that anyone who walks into the Wildwoods would be changed. So yes, we just saw Vayne and Loke going into the woods from two different perspectives. And so, in the woods, Vayne starts fighting a demon. One that looks kinda similar to all the skins from the new skin line, which means it is still quite different from all the traditional demons. But surprisingly, as she attacks it, the demon talks back. And it turns out the demon knows her because it mentioned some lines of Vayne's mentor. After which it is even mentioned that Vayne failed them all in her training. Now, of course, as a reminder, the demons of Runeterra tend to cling onto specific emotions. I mean, all the new skins in the new skin line reference it too. So it is likely that this specific demon is focusing on something like hatred or anger. But soon after that, Vayne successfully pins it down, and it was revealed that this demon is indeed her possessed mentor. And we learned that his name was Niles. So naturally, Vayne confronts him about the truth. And the truth was that apparently her parents got some kind of healing. But the healing was questionable, and the comic doesn't exactly explain what that means. But it could mean two different things. Either her parents got actually corrupted by a demon and there was real healing, which would mean they went through exorcism, or, and this is the more likely outcome, her parents actually tried to meddle with the demonic power, but it was too much to handle for them, meaning that they used the power that they all fought against. And this is likely what really happened because of Vayne's following reaction. But unfortunately, we still have to wait for Loke's bio to have this 100% confirmed. Anyway, the key part is that it was confirmed that all of this is happening before Vayne's parents were killed. Meaning they went through some kind of a healing before Evelyn finished them off. Now, the truth is that all of this is said by a demon. And demons tend to lie to evoke emotions. So whether any of this is actually true, well, we'll have to wait for Loke's lore. So after this, refusing to listen to anything more, Vayne finished him off. And as she did, the demon who possessed Niles was now clinging onto Vayne. And since Vayne immediately started being violent, it means the demon is likely all about the hatred. And because of this reaction, it is far more likely that her parents tried to control a demonic power. Why else would Vayne actually be mad at them? But interestingly enough, with the hatred taking over her, Vayne started talking about someone else. Someone who wasn't Niles. It was someone she shouldn't have trusted. Meaning, this one other person had to be Loke. Specifically, it seems like whatever happened to Vayne's parents, Loke was involved. So either he was involved in some kind of healing, or he is the one who tried and helped them control a demonic power. And eventually, that would lead into Evelyn claiming them. And since all the teasers are about characters kinda being possessed by demons or potentially controlling them, yes, I wouldn't be surprised if Loke's character was all about controlling the demons instead of killing them. Remember this in case I'm actually correct when the lore comes out. And so next, Vayne goes onto a demonic rampage, after which, who's that? Well, it seems like Loke actually arrives on screen at the end. Or at least, a part of him. Here we got his feet. A very classic Riot thing. After this, Vayne gets completely taken over by the demon. And we get to see Loke's arm. What's cool here is that the tattoo on his hand actually matches the symbol on the letter, meaning that symbol is likely related to the demon hunters. Now, even though this is where the comic ends, we should also mention that this is the first time we actually get to see the big demon behind Vane. And I assume that we can only see the demon because this is how Loke can see them. It was mentioned that all the new demons are bright because that's how demons can see each other. They see all the emotions as bright colors. So what if this is actually Loke's perspective? And he is trying to control the demons, and therefore he can see them. This is just a good old personal theory. But yes, that is unfortunately where the comic really ends. And so, what did we learn from this? Well, surprisingly, this opened up a whole new story for Vane. And surprisingly, this story doesn't even touch on Evelyn, or at least that is the case for now. You see, it is very likely that after this, Vane is gonna go through a story arc where she has to get rid of the demon that is possessing her. We will go through whatever Loke's story was with her parents. And as a result, I would not be surprised if at the end, in Act 2 of Season 2, we would actually get to see Evelyn again. It would make sense for Evelyn to be the big conclusion of the story. But for now, she is kinda gone. And so, how was this comic received on the internet? Well, violently, actually. You see, surprisingly, all the people who are good old lore fans are actually fine with this. If you go on the Lore of League subreddit, people actually praise Riot exploring something else than the Mage Seekers again. And no one really has an issue with Vane having a new story. But on the other side, there are also all the other people who really liked Vane and Evelyn, and they are mad there are tiny changes. With that said, there is one big retcon that I think Riot has to do now. Because yes, there are also some people who are afraid of the fact that Frey is totally gonna get cut. Because in Vane's original lore, there was the entire thing with Evelyn and her parents, after which Vane then wanted to become a demon hunter to fight demons and bad magic, and so she traveled to Freljord and got an Iceborn mentor there called Frey. Of course, Frey eventually turned out to be a shaman, which could be considered dark magic, and so Vane killed her. But truth be told, I don't think any of that is possible now. First of all, Vane is training to be a demon before Evelyn happened, after which there isn't really a gap to do any of this comic. This comic is essentially replacing the entire storyline with Frey. So you know what? Yeah, that one is retconned. Unless all of this is happening after the storyline with Frey, at which point it's kinda confusing. But if you are mad about anything else in this comic, just remember that we are talking about demons. So who knows what's even true. So yes, if there is anything missing, it is patience, people. Yes, I know the lore is moving quite slowly, but so far, the theme and even the skin line brought in good lore. I did not expect Riot to turn this into something potentially canonical. That is a W on its own. And so, if you ask about my criticism, I will have to say that if I am waiting for something, I am waiting for Shaco. There is no way he's not gonna be here, right?